So my name is Matt Rogatsky with the National Governors Association. Thanks to all for attending today's session. Just a reminder, it'll be recorded and sent out after the fact with slides from Energy Information Administration. So NGA, we're always interested in finding different ways to serve governors and advisors. One thing we've done in the past is work with the U.S. Energy Information Administration to get some of the best energy data that's out there. And so to get a better sense of the 2020 outlook in the energy space, we're working with two energy experts to preview the 2020 energy outlook and the state energy portal that is just a couple of the products that EIA works on. So a goal for this conversation is help inform some of the decisions being made in each state, especially during today's current legislative sessions. So there's a vast amount of information in EIA, and we'll hear a little bit about some of the different energy mixes in various regions. So each state is different and may have different applications for the data. If any participants have ways they plan on using this information, that'd be helpful to share. There's a chat box feature within Zoom that you can enter any questions, comments. So there's also a chat feature and a Q&A box that feel free to add in any specific questions you may have. As for the run of show, we'll hear first about the AEO from 2020, and then we'll have a break for questions, and then get a demo on the state energy portal, and then go into more questions after that. So the demo can include specific state questions. Earlier, I was interested in checking out my home state of Minnesota and found different electricity and fuel prices. Also found out that the average temperature in Minnesota is 39.3 degrees. So that is a fun little fact I found out throughout the year. I guess that's why we're known as a pretty cold state. Anyway, so if others have requests, please add those to the chat and we can practice doing different run-throughs of the state energy portal. So first we will hear from EIA Deputy Administrator Steve Nally to get a little bit of to some opening remarks and hear what the agency is working on these days. So I'll turn it over to Steve. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matt. And good afternoon. As Matt said, my name is Steve Nally and I'm the Deputy Administrator here at the U.S. Energy Information Administration. As many of you know, EIA is the nation's premier source of independent and impartial energy information. And as such, our work informs public sector decision-making at all levels. That's why EIA's partnership with NGA and venues like this is so important. EIA delivers more than charts and numbers. Our intention is to give decision makers context for this information, and connecting EIA's experts with consumers of energy information, such as yourselves, is vital to delivering the level of context that enables data-driven decisions. In a moment, I'll turn things over to Terry Yan, the manager of the EIA's AEO, as Matt referenced a few minutes ago. And it's one of EIA's flagship products, and it projects U.S. energy supply, consumption, and trade through 2050. It was released just a few weeks ago. And Terry will discuss some of the key takeaways, but a couple of the key highlights of it are just four things I'll touch on quickly. The rate of U.S. energy consumption growth remains slower than GDP growth, so the energy intensity of the U.S. economy continues its historical decline. The electricity generation fuel mix continues to experience a rapid rate of change, and the United States continues to produce historically high levels of crude oil and natural gas. And finally, today's U.S. energy-related carbon dioxide emissions are projected to fall, then resume modestly through 2030, or in 2030. You also hear from Stacy Angel, EIA's Energy Information Portfolio Analyst, and she'll provide an overview of EIA's State Energy Portal, which is designed to help you understand the overall energy context of your state. So on behalf of EIA, thank you for providing this information sharing opportunity. And with that, I'll turn it over to Terry.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, so I'll talk to you guys about the AEO 2020, which Steve mentioned came out January 29th. Before I talk about the AEO 2020, I wanted to do a little plug. about another outlook that may be useful for you guys, which is our short-term energy outlook, lovingly called the CO. And basically it projects monthly everything that we project in the AEO, so electricity prices or wherever it is that you guys want. And we go out 12 to 24 months. So the latest CO, which is the February CO, will project out to 2021. We also have the summer and winter fuels outlooks that supplement the CO. So the summer fuels outlook will be coming out in April with the April CO, and then the winter fuels outlook usually comes out, I think, November. All right, so Steve had kind of touched upon these 4 key takeaways on the AEO. I guess before I delve into each one of those in more detail, I do want to say that the AEO is not a prediction, but a projection, because it's based off of a given set of assumptions. So we're not predicting the future, just projecting it. I won't repeat these since Steve had talked about them, but I'll go through them kind of one by one shortly. Since I said that, yes, the AEO is a projection based on a given set of assumptions, here's kind of what the big assumptions are. And so with the reference case, we have current laws and regulations, and it's as of the end of September 2019. And so we basically make our projections based off of these current laws and regulations. So if there's any sunset dates, we will sunset them. It's also based off of our current views on trends in technology and economics and demographics. We also do side cases. We have 8 side cases this year. We have the 6 side cases that we usually do. So those are high and low economic growth, where we vary the GDP growth rate. So in the reference case, it's 1.9%. For the high and low, it's 2.4 and 1.4%. We also have the high and low oil price cases. And so with that reference case, we have an oil price path that reaches $105 per barrel of Brent by 2050, and then the high and low reaches $183 per barrel and $46 per barrel, respectively. And then we also have the oil and gas supply cases. We renamed them so that they're much more palatable to say. They used to be called the high and low, I think, resource and technology, high and low oil and gas resource and technology cases. Nevertheless, basically they represent so the high oil and gas supply represents there being more oil and natural gas resources, and that the technology, there's enough technological improvements such that the costs to extract them are lower. And then the converse is true for the low oil and gas supply case. And then this year, we've introduced 2 new side cases, the high and low renewables cost case, where we kind of look at we explore the uncertainty around the future costs of renewables technologies, specifically solar and wind. And so with the high case, we assume that there's no cost reductions in these technologies. With the low renewables cost case, we assume that the renewables, the overnight capital cost of renewable generation technologies are 40% lower in 2050 than the costs in the reference case in 2050. So yeah, and then before I jump to the key takeaways, I did also want to say that with the reference case, we want to always stress that it's sort of to be used as a baseline that can be kind of compared with these side cases or any other side cases that people want to run that include kind of alternative assumptions. All right, with that, I would jump into the first key takeaway, which is about U.S. energy demand. And so essentially, we say that total U.S. energy consumption grows much more slowly than GDP. And so the different pieces that kind of make up the total energy consumption are pictured on the left, these 3 pieces, basically population, GDP per capita, and energy intensity. And so our population assumptions from the census, we have population increasing, GDP per capita, which we get from IHS Markit, we have that assumption also increasing at 1.9% for the reference case. And then, but most importantly, we have energy intensity decreasing, and that is a combination of various energy efficiency improvements. As a result of these three pieces, we have total energy consumption kind of increasing slowly. I think at about 0.3%, I believe. So setting the scene with U.S. energy demand kind of growing slowly, I'm going to talk a little bit about electricity generation. So as you can only imagine, because total U.S. energy is growing slowly, electricity load growth is also, we're projecting it to grow slowly as well. And so historically, up until, I guess, the 2010s, so from 1990 to 2010, electricity consumption grew about maybe 2 to 3% per year. We have it kind of flattening out over the projection period, and we are projecting electricity growth to be at about 1% per year in the reference case, which is lower than our GDP growth rate. And this is largely because of energy efficient appliances, LEDs, and other efforts to increase consumption efficiency are being offset by economic growth, so it's not entirely flat. So it's being, yes, offset by economic growth, the increase in gadgets, also all the switching to electrification, and population shifts to warmer regions. So against this background of kind of like level or slowly growing electricity demand growth and energy demand growth, I'm going to kind of talk about the electricity generation dynamics. So it's a very dynamic market out there, as you'll see. So on the left, I kind of show the electricity generation from various fuels, and then on the right is a close-up of just the renewable electricity generation. And so on the left, you'll see that renewables generation surpasses natural gas generation after 2040, and that coal and nuclear really just drop off. Coal especially after 2020, I guess into the mid-2020s, and then it kind of levels off throughout the projection period, mainly because the less efficient coal plants have retired now, and the ones that are left are the more efficient ones, and therefore we have coal kind of flattening out. If we pivot to the right graph to look at renewables, we have solar generation really skyrocketing, as well as wind, and we have hydroelectric kind of remaining flat along with geothermal. And in fact, I guess if another shameless plug for one of our products, but if anyone signs up for the Today in Energy product, I think yesterday's Today in Energy article talked about how this year, I think 2019, they just found, or 2019 was the first year in which, annually speaking, wind generation surpassed hydro generation. So that's pretty exciting. If we look at kind of how this generation mix changes when we change the cost of renewables technologies, you'll see that they're, unsurprisingly, when we have renewables being cheaper, renewables really take off. So in the middle graph, you'll see at that green line, which is the renewables line, really takes off, whereas natural gas kind of just stays steady when compared to the reference case. And then in the high renewables cost case, where we have no cost reductions in renewables, there's much less renewables, and natural gas generation really takes off as compared with the reference case. So you want to say that in all these cases, our natural gas prices are relatively low. So that explains kind of the increase in natural gas generation that we see in the leftmost graph for the reference case, as well as the high renewables cost case. And why natural gas also doesn't entirely plummet in the middle graph when we look at the low renewables cost case. So if we look at kind of capacity additions and retirements that we project, you'll see that a lot of the retirements that we're projecting are in coal and nuclear. And a lot of the capacity additions that are being projected are mainly solar and wind. And there's more wind in the earlier years, so kind of in the 2020 to 2025 than later, largely because we're trying to, it's a result of the PTC, the production tax credit. And so as that phases out, there's not too much incentive to build wind capacity, but solar keeps going. And then natural gas fire combined cycle generation capacity is also added through 2050. Just for some numbers, we project the United States is going to add 117 gigawatts of new wind and solar capacity between 2020 and 2023. And then for this, the solar capacity is both utility scale and small scale applications. And if we look at it regionally, as I thought maybe this might be of interest to you guys, so here is a very busy chart, and we have wind in blue. So there's onshore wind, offshore wind. We have solar in yellow, which is small scale and utility scale. We have biomass and hydro and geothermal and solid waste. And then we're also looking at various cases. So we have the reference case. HC is the high renewables cost case. The LC is the low renewables cost case. And the hogs and the logs are high oil and gas supply and low oil and gas supply cases. And you'll see that solar, so the yellow bars, really grow the most in the southeast and the mid-continent regions in nearly all the cases. And so these regions usually have higher than average delivered U.S. natural gas prices. So natural gas generation is more expensive as an option when you retire coal and nuclear. And also because solar PV generated is mostly obviously during the daytime hours, can readily substitute natural gas generation during those periods, and those periods obviously are of high demand. Regions with existing wind capacity that continue to install wind capacity between the projection period as well. So if we look at kind of across the cases in the low oil and gas supply case, so the logs case, in that case our natural gas prices are higher because it's more expensive to extract natural gas resources. And on top of that, we also have fewer natural gas resources. These are the assumptions going into that case. So when the natural gas prices are higher, you'll see that onshore wind kind of becomes the incremental generation source in the mid-continent region. So the blue bar really skyrockets in the logs case. And the mid-continent obviously has a lot of wind resources. And in the northeast, ERCOT, CAISO, and west regions, there's relatively small variations across the cases, and it's most likely a result of the fact that the region's current small shares of existing coal generation capacity is already pretty small, so it doesn't have to be, there's not much need for replacement over the projection period, and the share of renewables in their portfolios is already pretty large. All right, so shifting gears now to kind of give a little glimpse about crude oil and natural gas. If you look here, you'll see on the left we have petroleum, other liquids consumption. On the right, we plot production. And so we basically have slow growth in petroleum, other liquids consumption going along with the theme of slow energy growth or energy demand growth. And so the side cases that have the most impact on kind of petroleum consumption obviously are the high and low economic growth, because when there's higher and lower GDP, then we can buy, because a lot of the petroleum consumption is motor gasoline for transportation, then we either drive more or drive less. On the supply side, this shows oil and natural gas plant liquids being produced. And so we show continued growth because of rising oil prices and falling production costs, and that in the reference case, it grows to crude oil actually reaches about 14 million barrels before leveling off. And if we add natural gas plant liquids on top of that, it reaches above 20 million barrels per day before it kind of levels off as we kind of tap out all the sweet spots. When we have more resources and it's cheaper to extract them, as in the high oil and gas supply case, we get way more production, and the converse is true for the low oil and gas supply case. So if we look at exports, as you can see from this previous slide, there's, when we look at supply minus consumption, we get net exports or net imports. And basically, in the reference case, we project that the U.S. continues to be a net exporter of petroleum volumetrically for the whole projection period. And when we have more production, as in the high oil and gas supply case, then we export more. In the low oil and gas supply case, we then become a net, and we start importing more than we export after 2030. Pivoting to natural gas, on the left we have natural gas trade, and on the right we kind of show the effect of LNG exports, kind of that relationship between crude price to natural gas price and how that affects LNG exports. So focusing on the left, we have the U.S. remaining a net importer of natural gas from Canada through 2050, but the imports from Canada, which is shown in pink here, they decrease, while the exports to Canada, which is that darkish red, increases a little bit. We also project pipeline exports to Mexico, which is shown in brown, that brown swath, to really increase before leveling off. And this is due to the pipeline infrastructure that's being built within and to Mexico. And we project that by 2030, Mexico's domestic natural gas production is going to begin to kind of displace U.S. exports. So that's why it kind of levels off. And you'll notice that the greatest increase, of course, in U.S. exports of natural gas is that dark blue chunk, which is LNG. And we have LNG growing to 2030 as additional LNG export terminals are constructed. And then as U.S. sourced LNG kind of becomes less competitive in the world markets after 2030, we project it kind of leveling off, the export volumes leveling off. So on the right, this is where we kind of look at the level of LNG exports and how it varies significantly depending on our assumptions about oil price and also the amount of resources, oil and gas resources that we have. So historically, most of the LNG has been traded under long-term contracts that are linked to crude oil prices. And as more natural gas is getting traded via short-term contracts or on spot markets, the link between the LNG and oil prices are going to weaken over time. So you see that kind of leveling off after 2030-ish. And so U.S. LNG exports are going to become less sensitive to the crude to natural gas price ratio and more responsive to the global LNG supply and natural gas demand dynamics. And so with the high oil price case, the crude to natural gas price ratio is very high. And so U.S. LNG priced, the U.S. LNG, which is priced based on relatively low domestic spot prices rather than the oil-linked contract, obviously it's going to be very economic. So therefore, the highest levels of LNG exports are projected in this high oil price case. Also, with the high oil and gas supply case, we project low natural gas prices in that case. Therefore, we also see high levels of LNG and more levels of LNG than the reference case. So just to show you a bit, since I've been talking about crude oil and natural gas prices a lot, we have on the left our crude oil price path, and on the right, the natural gas price at Henry Hub that we project. So on the left, crude oil prices are exogenous to our model, so they are assumptions, input assumptions. And so you'll see the various price paths that go into our model for the various cases. On the right, the natural gas prices at Henry Hub we solve, so that's endogenously. So this comes out of our model, and you'll see kind of the range in natural gas prices that we're projecting under various assumptions. So it can be, for the reference case, we don't see natural gas prices above $4, but it can go as high as $6 to $7 per MMBTU, or as low as $2 to $3 per MMBTU. Of course, right now we're in an extremely low natural gas price environment, so there's that. And my very last point, just to look at some energy-related carbon dioxide emissions in the U.S. We see that emissions kind of decline in the early years of the projection period before they rise again. But in the end, in 2050, we have emissions at levels that are 4% below those in 2019. And so if we kind of break out the total energy-related carbon dioxide emissions by sector or by fuel, we can see for the transportation sector, there's this kind of smile that you'll see, and it's largely because in the early years, emissions decline as the CAFE standards are in place, and so there's fewer emissions from petroleum. But as the standards kind of get less and less stringent and more people drive, then we see that uptick in emissions kind of take off as people obviously drive more and we burn more petroleum. With the electric power sector, we see that there's a drop-off in the near term up until the mid-2020s. And that's largely because of the retirement of coal-fired plants. With the industrial sector, because natural gases are pretty low, we project industrial use of natural gas to keep increasing. Therefore, emissions increase as a result of that. And ResCom, the residential and commercial sectors, are pretty level in their emissions. So before I conclude, I wanted to kind of give a teaser. In 1 week or so, we're going to be releasing an Issues in Focus article that may be of interest to folks, and it's on alternative policies, where we kind of explore the uncertainties around legislation and regulations. And so there are 4 pieces to this Issues in Focus. We look at what would happen if we didn't implement the Affordable Clean Energy Rule and kind of what impact that has on the electricity market and energy market. We also look at what happens if we make an assumption that all 50 states have to achieve a minimum of 50% generation from carbon-free sources by 2050. We also look and explore kind of what happens when, instead of compensating folks for their solar PV at retail rates, that they are compensated at wholesale rates, and kind of see what kind of impact that has on various elements of the electricity market. And then lastly, we ran 3 different carbon fee cases where we kind of see what impacts various levels of carbon fees would have on the energy markets. And these fees, they start in 2021, and we have them increasing by 5% per year. So that's coming out March 5th. There's an event at the RFF, Resources for the Future. I think there's going to be a webcast, and I think it starts at 9 or something like that. So yeah, so that's exciting. And then the last Issues in Focus that will be released later this year is looking at kind of the effects of different levels of U.S. LNG exports have on the U.S. natural gas market. So yeah, if there are any questions.
Great, thanks, Carrie. That was a lot of good information there, and yeah, a lot to think about there. If participants on the line have any questions, you can put those into the chat box function or the question and answer feature of Zoom. But just kicking it off, I have just one question. So what were some of the biggest uncertainties you saw with your projections moving ahead?
Wow. I guess everything, really. There's just, yeah, I mean, everything is pretty uncertain. So that's why we have these side cases. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess that is kind of a hard question to answer because, yes, everything even though the model is giving out kind of like these point estimates, there's kind of uncertainties around everything.
Right.
And so just given kind of our reference case assumptions, this is what we see. But everything is, obviously it's not a prediction, right? So I can't say that these are right or wrong. It's just what we see if we put in these set of assumptions. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Maybe just getting a little bit more specific about a few state policies. So, are there any specific state policies that might be like factoring into the assumptions that you make, like perhaps something like a renewable portfolio standard
Yeah,
or other options? I
yeah.
like the CAFE standard example, but that was on a federal level. But yeah, just curious.
Yeah. So we have federal and state level. So on the state level, we have the RPSs. We also have some state energy efficiency mandates. You can find all the federal and state legislation and regulations on our assumptions page, something called the Summary of Legislation and Regulations Included in AO 2020, I think. And there's a whole table listing all the state policies and federal policies that are in the reference case. And then for the alternative policies case, that's when we put in additional kind of state level mandates saying, okay, like say those states that already have a mandate, continue as is, but those that don't, we kind of impose this path to which you get to 50% generation or carbon-free generation by 2050. And just seeing kind of what effect that has.
Okay, that's good. And then one other, so I saw you mentioned that there's slow growth in the consumption of crude oil and natural gas, and largely due to maybe a lack of GDP growth and decreasing or increasing motor gas prices. Is it an overall energy consumption that is slowing, or is it just more specifically about the crude oil and natural gas fuels?
Oh, no, it's all of energy consumption that's slowing, and it's largely because of energy efficiency, not necessarily GDP growth. Like for petroleum, it's just growing slowly, not only because, like CAFE standards being in place in the early projection period, and then kind of as it becomes less stringent, and then we have GDP growing, so there's going to be more passenger travel. We have people driving a lot again, so it kind of increases at the end. But we just kind of see overall that total U.S. energy consumption is not growing as quickly as GDP. I think it grows at like 0.3% or something like that.
Sure. Okay, that's all helpful. So I have a couple other questions, but maybe we should move on to the second part, and then we can have an overall wrap up at the end with a few more of these questions. But thanks, Terry, for all that great information. And now we'll dive a little bit more on the state energy products.
Okay. Hello, this is Stacy Angel. I'll move on to our demonstration of state data products. I work with our Office of Energy Statistics, so I'm not involved with Terry's modeling work, but looking back in time and understanding energy. So our historical data series cover a lot of energy types, consumption, movement of energy, production of energy. And we've heard from states that are using these series consistently through programs planning and policy analysis. I've also heard that this vast set of data is hard to find what they need. So we have a new state portal that makes new interactive ways to find and use our data across all of the different surveys and estimates we publish. This portal also that I'll demonstrate in a bit, lets you connect to some more detailed state energy data products like our long-standing state energy data system and the state electricity profiles. These products themselves have been increasing what they're publishing and providing more long time series history. We've added some great capacity factors for power plant data summarized at the state level and efficiency programs as well. We also are looking to expand our REC survey to produce some estimates for the 2020 data year that would include all 50 states and DC. So we've got a wealth of state data at EIA. The state portal will also link you to some market data that might be at the regional level or an individual point like the Henry Hub. And then the portal could be your entry point into EIA's data to then link into some other interactive dashboards and weekly updates. So you can really stay up to date with what's changing in the market. We're finding these type of products are used by states, but they're also used by industry, academia, citizens within your state are likely coming to these products as well to understand energy. Before you might know which product to go to for how to answer your question, you might want to understand the overall energy context for your state. So we will dive into the demonstration. I encourage you to type into the chat feature of the webinar if there's any energy data you're interested in seeing or any particular questions you have about your state. And then while I show you the features and functionality of the portal, I can show you that data chart, and then you can see some of the data you're interested in while you see how this portal moves. Okay, so I'll need to change into my web browser because this will be a live active demo. Our product right now is considered beta as we're still IT testing out any bugs, but the data is being read from our API database, so the data you download should be the most current data point available for what you're interested in. The landing page offers an infographic for that quick take on consumption and production across the U.S. I heard New Mexico might be joining today, so I'll click here on New Mexico, landing page for an individual state. You'll be able to see the overview of how New Mexico consumes energy by energy source. And then within that electricity slice there, what type of energy sources are used to make the electricity, which varies widely across the country. And then New Mexico is a net, it generates electricity that flows out of the state. So it'll say interstate outflows of electricity. And then it does not import any electricity from another country, which happens in many states with Canada in particular. And the infographic ends with the end-use consumptions by sector. So which of the end-use sectors are consuming most of the energy in your state. The excluding losses here means that there's some conversion losses upstream of consumption, such as when the electric power plant uses coal or natural gas to produce electricity. Some of our statistics will attribute that to the end-use sector. These circles are not attributing those conversion losses to the end-use sector. And every one of our graphics or informations will have a notes and sources I button, and you can dig into what data you're looking at. Okay. So there's some quick facts about your state, some quick indicators. The bottom panel here will populate for your state on where you rank the highest from a set of about 10 metrics. We do rankings. So New Mexico is the third highest in crude oil production in the United States and the 9th for natural gas production and total energy production. Another good way to understand the overview for your state is to click on the Analysis tab. You could print this out. It's a text description about energy within your state. We update these on an annual basis. So if things look slightly out of date, it may be that the update's coming soon, but it gives you that text overview of energy in your state. Now I'd like to move to where you can get the most current data available for your state. And this is a series of dashboards and charts. Are there any requests from folks on the webinar for which state I should go to first? We have dashboards. What's that?
I'm seeing Nevada.
All right, so we will change our state to Nevada. Do you have a certain energy source you're interested in?
It looks like we are just across different sectors is great. Oh, geothermal, thank you.
Oh, okay. So geothermal, you might want to start with a renewables dashboard when you're looking at geothermal. We have our renewable energy consumption estimates. This is annually from our state energy data system, the SEDS data system. If you click on any gear icon for a chart, you will see the chart available. Here it's a long time history chart back to 1960. You could change that and just sort of look at the, since 2000. You could modify the time series along the bottom. You can read a description of what the data series is, where it comes from, links to related data products. But then you can also filter and leave your chart with just geothermal. You can change that to a line chart. Nevada, I know California's known for having a lot of geothermal. So you can compare your state to another state by adding the other states to your chart. Let's see what a neighboring state, or Utah, you know, wrap in all the neighboring states and see how that data looks. You know, your state, here Utah has lower geothermal than Nevada and California. You could also remove the comparison states, leave your chart with a single line, and the portal will allow you to apply analysis tools where you can index to a start date as a percent to see that geothermal's increased 134% since the year 2000. And then you could change that starting value as well. Say, oh, I just am curious since 2010. How much growth has there been in geothermal since 2010? And then that percent growth would be 47% growth since 2010. And in geothermal energy, as measured in billion BTUs, up here is a unit, billion BTUs. And then any changes you've made to your chart, you can save. And now your dashboard will show that chart. And the state portal, as long as the cookies are not refreshed, will allow the next time you open this page to show that same modified chart. And if in your state you're doing something with geothermal, you want to take this chart and have it on your own website and have it automatically update on your own website, you could download this as a chart embed that gives you a string of code that you can embed on your own website, and it will read from EIA's database and update this and keep it current as there's new info. For this particular series, it's annual. They're estimates based off of a methodology that does have a slight lag, but there's other series here we update on a monthly basis, a weekly basis. One of the series is hourly, and you can embed that chart onto your site and it will be updated as well. So another way to look at geothermal could be in the net electricity generation. Here we have some more current data available as well. So you could, the default frequency is monthly with our most recent observation of December 2019. You could compare wind to geothermal. In this sectors here, depending on what data is available from EIA, you'll see different filters available within your chart options. So with all of our electricity statistics from our 923 survey, we have the ability to filter out just what's owned by the commercial sector or the electric power sector. So with geothermal, the electric power sector has much higher generation than the commercial sector. But both sectors are reporting to us and responding with electric power generation from geothermal of units higher than 1 megawatt, which is a utility scale plant. We also have small scale estimates on the solar basis, which I've added that in here as the green line along the bottom. Those estimates start in 2014. So that's some basic chart functionality. I mentioned that you could embed the chart on your own website. You could also download the data to work with it yourself. And we offer a CSV file, which if you save it as a CSV, you could open it in Excel. You can download the chart as a PDF or image file. You can download JSON code for advanced users within your organization. But this add to download feature is a new thing we're offering on the portal product and our hourly electric grid monitor product. it adds the series you're interested to a shopping cart. So if you're used to shopping online, it's a shopping cart-like feature that will pre-populate a worksheet. You can choose from an Excel add-in or a Google Sheet add-in or CSV or JSON code. So you could click on multiple charts and select different data you want from multiple charts, but then download it all in one file. And with this Excel add-in tool, when you hit download, you get an Excel file to open, which will automatically add an EIA download to your system. And if you have any trouble with that, contact us, we'll help you out, get it set up. But most users are finding this come up on their screen automatically. You hit Get Data. Now your Excel file has gone out and read the data from EIA's API database. The next time you open this spreadsheet, say it's 3 months from now, you hit Get Data, the entire history time series is updated. So if we've had a revision in a previous month, the new value will show. If we've released 2 more months of data, your sheet will have that new data. You can build your own charts and references and calculations off of this type of data feed and then getting the data from us updated automatically. All right, so any other data folks are interested in?
Could you just navigate back to the ranking for Nevada's, or just the overview site, I think?
Okay.
And then the things it's ranked for, I believe. Yeah, right there. That was another question from the state. But other than that, I think we're okay. That was a lot of applications that you could have for anything. So that was great.
On the rankings, since somebody flagged that, the rankings right now are published with about 10 series with these interactive graphics on rankings. So if you pick Nevada, I think we might have folks here from North Dakota and New Hampshire. Oops, I got Maine. When you go into the bubble charts, the state you're on will be yellow and then other states will be black. And then all of the states' values are on a scatter plot line where you can sort of see where your state falls for that metric along other states. So the first one here is total energy consumption per capita. So folks in Nevada use less than the average. Total energy expenditures, they're also spending less per capita on energy. Production, they have low production compared to other states. Let's see, retail rates, I often have heard questions about natural gas and electricity rates. They also are lower than the average and about in the middle of this other states I've chosen. Our current energy profiles will allow you to look at this data in a table format as well as a heat map. So those features are also available in the new interface. So with electricity retail prices across the country, here's your quick look at every state's. Okay. So if there's no other pre-canned questions, I wanted to show folks something we have on our electricity dashboard with this new portal. We have an hourly regional electricity load series of how much electricity throughout the country is being generated at the balancing authority level. We also have real-time nuclear capacity outage, well, daily. This is updated once a day if nuclear power plants are operating or are out. We've been able to pull in data that's not EIA data, but from regional transmission organizations. These entities have markets for electricity. For about 5 of the ISOs, we have their day-ahead price series available. And then if you were to want more information about an RTO, you can link out of our site into their site to get that additional information. But it also lets you see that chart and that information alongside EIA data as well. if you, any other questions come in the chat?
I am not seeing any, but yeah, I'm
Okay.
just sort of thinking about all, this really eases a lot of the research that I have to do, which is super helpful because it's all so centralized. I really appreciate all the ease of access here. I hope states on the line are seeing a lot of the different applications for this. This is really helpful.
One other feature we have is a custom dashboard where you can start with a blank slate and only add those charts you're interested in. So if you want to see what's happening with natural gas production, you can sort of start typing in natural gas. Now I'm in a state of New Hampshire when I've added that chart, and they don't have natural gas production, so it's empty. But if you pull in some of the other states which do, you can create a chart then with the production data and see how that's growing. And then you could add a visualization with what's happening with consumption. We're producing a lot more. And this unlock dashboard feature here will let you move the charts next to each other. And so within Ohio and Pennsylvania, the industrial consumption of natural gas is much higher than the commercial consumption. Okay. The average consumption. Okay, so I think I had a different chart ready to go with natural gas here. Sorry. I'm sort of going too quickly here. You know, if there's other, I just wanted to show that sort of ability you have to add your own charts and move the charts around and ask your own questions and sort of build out a storyline for yourself, and let those cookies save that and revisit it later. Okay, so if there's the one tab here I opened up quickly, this is something you can link to from the state energy portal, is our hourly electric grid. What I have here is New England. New England is a region within the electric grid where you can see what the hourly generation is day in, day out. For folks who aren't regularly looking at electricity consumption or aren't familiar with load shape, what you see here is electricity load gets higher early in the day, dips in the afternoon, and then goes up higher in the evening. Around 4 to 9 o'clock, much higher consumption. The region also brings in a lot of electricity from Canada, so they have a lot of net inflow into the region from Canada and New York. Today, the most recent history is bringing a lot more in from New York than our annual averages. And you can look at what the energy mix is, the daily generation mix is by region. About half natural gas is close to, it's natural gas, nuclear, wind and other. The other here within New England is a lot of biomass. But this same type of chart you can see for other regions in the country as well, and have a sense for how different every grid is across the country, and the mix and flow and load shape is across the country. And that's using some of the same features as the state portal, and you can access it from the state portal. You know, something we did during the development of the state portal is reached out to states and wanted to hear from them what they needed. And that's been great input for us in designing this portal, but also understanding your data needs. If there's no other areas to demonstrate from the portal, I can just highlight something else we're doing here at EIA. We are creating the largest sample ever with our residential energy consumption survey, and hoping to also pull out those 50 state and DC estimates. If states on the line here are interested in that sector's end-use consumption and wants to learn more about that, they could reach out to my colleague, James Berry here. I think that's about it for our slides. I've mentioned our embeds and then how to connect to EIA. There's just a lot of ways to connect with us. So any of us here on the call today, or these contacts and emails on this slide are great ways to get any questions answered or more information from EIA.
Great. Yeah, this has been so much amazing information, very thorough, very in-depth. Yeah, you guys answered a lot of the questions while I was going through it, and just helpful to see a walkthrough. I know I'll be using this information a lot, so thanks for that. Thank you to Nevada for volunteering themselves to do a run through them. That was nice to see that state. Yeah, I think we'll wrap up there. Really appreciated folks from EIA on the line for volunteering this information. And yeah, we'll keep an eye out for the upcoming information that you talked about. And we'll get this information to panelists on the line afterwards. So thank you so much.